Hi, I'm Brenda from Alameda County Nutrition Services Public Health Department, and we are here today to do a healthy recipe. Today we will be making a quinoa and black bean salad. A lot of these items I already have prepped. I do like to save some items to show you. We will be using green chilies. I bought jalapenos this time. Jalapenos do tend to be a little spicy, but it does give it a lot of flavor. One thing that I do like to do with jalapenos to cut the heat so that the heat won't be too much, I like to seed them. So you just cut the edges and you just keep going around. And that way you're cutting the jalapeno, you're just cutting the flesh, you're not taking the seeds. And you are left with, the seeds are all right there. As you can see, these little veined, they call them the veins. These have, these carry some of the heat also. And you could do this with any size, you could do them any size. It doesn't have to be that small. It could be bigger depending on how you like it. So here's our jalapeno, all nice and ready. So now we have our jalapeno. We also will be using scallions, which I have that here, and the recipe just calls for one. There's always the question of, should I use the whole thing? Should I just use the green part? Should I just use the white part? I like to say just use everything. You might want to cut just the edges, cut the ends, and you could put those to the side. But yeah, you could use everything. The more the merrier. You want to make sure that it's all sliced up until the end. And then, so we'll also be adding some cilantro. Cilantro, the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons, which I have my cilantro ready here to go. Now, cilantro, that's another thing that some people will say, oh, should I use the stems? Should I not use the stems? I would say that's up to you. If you use them, you got more fiber. I do tend to use most of the stem. I just cut the ends. And again, you know, then I just cut it in half so that I could have a nice little hand, like a bunch that I could hold with my hand. And you just do that rocking motion again. You're gonna just slice it up. Cilantro is very, very flavorful. It's an herb that gives it a real refreshing taste. And then we'll be adding our olive oil, cumin, and coriander. I have those here ready. Now our olive oil, we'll be using 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. So that's 1 tablespoon, and then there's a half a tablespoon. Olive oil is really, it's one of our healthy fats. We do want to make sure that we're consuming fat, but we want to make sure that we're consuming the right type of fat, and of course with moderation. And then we'll be using our cumin and coriander. These will be using 1/4 teaspoon. So this I will measure because I can eyeball it, but since I have it handy, it's better to use your measuring spoon right in there. And so there we go. We want to go ahead and mix that up real good. Let it marinate with the oil. And if you were here live, you could smell it. It smells really good. So we have this nice and ready. And so now we will be using our lemon. So our lime actually, I'm sorry, I mean lime, which you could use lemon, whatever you have at home. It doesn't have to be set in stone. We follow the recipe here, but at home you could improvise. So we will be using our limes, and it says about 4 teaspoons of lime juice. And then you cut it in half, and that helps loosen up the juice. So we're gonna add some lime juice to our mixture. 2 limes is usually about 2 teaspoons in each lime. Oops. Lemon is really a really good way to give any salad, not just this salad, but any salad. It's a really good way of giving it flavor. All right, so here we go. Our lime is in there. And so now we're going to be adding our tomatoes and our red and green bell peppers. And I have my beans already ready. So we'll be adding our beans. As for the tomato, I did leave half of it to show you how to chop it up. So you just slice it up. And there you go. You have a nicely chopped tomato. And so tomato, we will be using 2 cups of tomato. And I will use our bowl that we will be mixing everything in. And then so here's another cup of tomato. And there we go. So we have our tomato, and then we will be using bell pepper as well, which I have my bell pepper here ready to go. So the recipe calls for red and green bell peppers. Bell peppers have a lot of vitamin C. They are great, especially when they're in season, because they tend to be sweeter when they're in season. So we're going to be using about half of that. So I'm not even going to measure that because I already know that we're using half of that. There we go. You could say bell pepper is like, I would say as much vitamin C as about an orange. We want to go ahead and add our beans. So today we're using canned beans. There we go. So that's added in there. I'm going to go ahead and mix this a little bit more again just to make sure that all the juices get in there. I always like to kind of dip into one bowl and then dip into the other. Okay. So, and as for our tomato, bell pepper, and beans, I will go ahead and start mixing that. You can see how colorful that is. So that's saying, eat your colors, eat a rainbow of colors. Here you go. You have a beautiful rainbow here. Okay, and so we are pretty much ready to add our quinoa. And I will get my quinoa. So here's our quinoa, nice and fluffy. This is what you want to see. You want to make sure that it looks really nice and fluffy. Quinoa is a complete protein. I could say quinoa is probably one of the only proteins out there, grains, I mean, that is a complete protein. Okay, so we want to go ahead and mix this very well. So this is one of those dishes that it's pretty much a complete meal. You have all your food groups in here. You have your grains, you have your beans, which is, you got your little bit of iron in there, you got your vegetables, and we're going to go ahead and add our dressing type of mixture. And there we go. We want to make sure we get all the juice in there. Okay. So we want to go ahead and mix that very well. Okay, you can make sure all the juice just gets in there. Okay, and now we are going to just add a little bit of black pepper. And for this recipe, we can use any amount of black pepper. It says to taste. We don't need to use too much of it. It depends on your preference. So I'll just crack a little bit on top. So this is just to taste. So here we go. I think this is pretty much, it's pretty much ready. So we have our quinoa and black bean salad.